Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 201st edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And I can reveal this is a Thursday. We don't normally do recordings on a Thursday, but this is a real break with tradition, very much around my arrangements, I think, this week. So, anybody watching on video will notice that we have a guest at the bottom of the screen there. It's Kathryn Loftus. Hello, Kathryn.
Hi Frank, hi Stan, hi everybody.
Now, Catherine and I have known each other for a few years, and I've been trying for about 18 months to get Catherine on Frankenstein chat, and I think I've let you down once or twice in terms of these arrangements. So thanks for your flexibility, Catherine, and we'll get back to you in a minute as to what you're up to. But Stan, we met yesterday as well. This is
Yeah,
once in a week.
not much has happened since yesterday.
I like the shirt, new shirt. That's always a good sign.
The new shirt, it's not new.
Well,
It's
no, it's
just,
a change of shirt from yesterday. That's
oh
why.
yeah. Yeah, I do tend to change my clothes slightly.
Oh well, yeah. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, we did a recording yesterday with Charlotte Wicks, who's an opera singer, and that's part of the Spotlight program that we do, and that is going up next week. So
Perhaps I should have had my bow tie on
yeah, we should then the
to
tux and
set the
everything.
scene
Yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah.
opera.
Anyway, Catherine, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, thank you. My name's Kathryn Loftus. I'm the director of a partnership in Bradford called the Education Alliance for Life Chances. It's quite a long title, but if I just explain what that is, it's a partnership of schools, multi-academy trusts, and the key public and voluntary sector organisations we have in Bradford to improve really the life chances, social mobility of our children and young people. And we work on the kind of key cross-cutting issues affecting children and young people in Bradford. So there's a real link between health and education and those complex systems. We're trying to work across health and education as complex systems to really tackle the structural inequalities and the root causes of some of the problems that are entrenched across the Bradford district. So we do that in partnership with our schools.
And your role in all of that?
So I'm the director of the partnership, but I guess I'm kind of the convener, the
You're a bit more than
enabler, the
that. Well, you are,
collaborator,
yeah.
the bringing together of
Yes.
folk really. And I guess it's about bringing together that community of the willing, Frank, where people recognise, yeah, you're in your own organisations and you've got your own goals and outcomes and things like that. But actually, what gets people together in a room is kind of just working together on might be school attendance or neurodiversity, autism, or what are the key issues affecting children. And health comes up an awful lot about how can we work better with our health colleagues and our schools. And I guess that's really a big focus of our work, over the last couple of years in Bradford.
Now, yeah, Stan, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the local authority in Bradford's had a tough time, hasn't it, over the last few years? So, do you want to just explain not the impact of that, but the how important your group has been while all that sort of change has been going on?
Yeah, I mean, as have a lot of local
Yes.
authorities, the challenge in terms of, the finances and the restrictions there. But in Bradford, due to the Ofsted inspection of children's services, they decided through the commissioner that they would set up a children's trust for their social care element of their children's services, and that went into a separate children and families trust that was set up in April 23. So that kind of it is Bradford Council owned, but it sits separately to the main council. And so that that's been a challenge to the system and the work there and the people that work in the council. But the impact has been, I guess, some fragmentation. I know that our families say they experience services in a fragmented way, and this isn't just about local authority services. This is about
Yeah.
health services. Going to appointments across the city, not being able to access local dentists or get a dentist appointment at all. So there's challenges across the system in Bradford. And I recognise, other northern cities have similar issues. But in Bradford, because we kind of, we've got a partnership of brilliant system leaders and decision makers where we convene and come together as this alliance to improve the life chances, that can we work in a different way in Bradford that really tries to join up in a systematic way some of these services that have become fragmented for all sorts of reasons. And it goes back to that thing I've said about complex systems.
Yeah, I think also, go on, Stan.
I was saying I did quite a bit of work on something similar when we were doing children's trusts in Lancashire, and the flaw in the system that we found was that the people who attended these meetings didn't have the authority to say yes, we'll do that, or they only had the authority to say yes, we'll do it, and they weren't the workers, they weren't the front face workers who actually.
Yeah.
And so I devised a method by which different meetings went on at different levels, so that the first meeting in anything was the strategic decision makers, the people at the top, and they were charged with allocating the funds and saying,
absolutely, Stan. I think you've hit on something there that, you can change things at a system level, but sometimes it doesn't filter through,
yeah,
does it, to the front line? You've got to try and do both in tandem. And I guess that's what we're doing in Bradford, which is quite innovative and trailblazing, is our Education Alliance for Life Chances works at that partnership system level. So we've got, the kind of key decision makers around the table there from key public sector organisations and our multi-academy trusts and schools. But then at a locality or a place-based level, we've got kind of convening partnerships that are around schools and practitioners in a local area, tackling one issue at one time. And they've developed that issue or prioritised an issue that affects children and young people in that locality. So in Bradford, we're testing that out in 3 areas, and we've called those areas Act Locally, because what they're trying to do is act locally together on one issue at one time in a place. And they are quite trailblazing, because yes, they're working on an issue together, but they've also decided, that convening partnership, what they would like from decision makers and commissioners, what needs to change in that system to affect things locally. So it's very interesting in Bradford how, say, Keighley, a town in Bradford, has prioritised tackling food insecurity, poor diet and nutrition as the cross-cutting issue for children and young people, whereas Homewood have decided to work on supporting children and young people vulnerable to crime. And then it's different again in Manningham and Girlington, where they really want to support the female pupils and parents around mental health. So taking a place-based approach, I would say, does work, because you're trying to understand what the data says around that local issue, but what are the lived experiences of that issue? But how do we get our strategic partners working in a different way to deliver things differently? And I think we've got a bit of a way forward there in Bradford about these school health hubs that we're trying to develop. But I'll pause there, Stan, because I don't know whether you want to come back on that.
No, it was just the frustration of, for example, people not understanding how schools work and being in a committee meeting and saying, right, well, tell schools to do this. And you say, well, we can't tell schools to do that. Schools are sort of independent. Well, aren't you the education department? Well, just tell them. And not understanding that that's not how the system works. Go on, Frank. So.
I was just going to say, I think this idea of because I've sat in on the strategic meeting in Bradford, and also been to the Keighley local, thanks to Kathryn. But I think this idea of just working with the willing, and actually this idea that actually if it works, schools will want to be part of it, and actually you've got a better chance of it working if you've got people who want it to work, who've got enthusiasm for it. And I remember going to the Keighley meeting, Kathryn, and on the way out, I had to leave early to get back, I think. across the Pennines. And a gentleman who I think was involved in the parks, sort of recreation department, said, what you've got to remember is that we're a bit tired of government telling us we've got to concentrate on the things that we don't do well. What this project is about is saying, well, what assets have we got? What strengths have we got in this area? And how can we use our strengths to actually sort of tackle some of the issues that are problems? And he was saying you've really got to flip it on its head, to really sort of make communities feel as though they can take action, as opposed to the centre coming in and saying you're not doing that well enough. You should focus on that, which may not be the area they have any expertise in whatsoever. So I think there is something here about getting everybody, or getting the people that are wanting to get involved round the table, which I think is what you've done, and then also making sure that those local areas feel as though they've got the power to affect change.
Absolutely. And you mentioned assets, Frank. Schools are assets, the anchor institutions in local communities, and we saw it very much, didn't we, through the pandemic, where schools were stepping up, delivering food parcels, actually going out, walking the streets and checking in on families, trying to make sure that the vulnerable children got some time in the classroom and things like this. So really reaching out and being part of local communities. And I guess we really want to build on that with this school health hub idea that we've got. So the 3 at locally areas that I mentioned that we're developing in the Bradford area, we'd really like to have a school health hub in each of those areas, because what we recognise is the challenge of children getting to health appointments, whichever that might be, or getting tests, immunisations, these key health milestones that they might need check-in and get support for, that they're not getting to the appointment. So if we can bring health and wellbeing services to work in and through schools, surely that's a win-win for education in terms of the education outcomes, but also in terms of health outcomes. And this link between making sure that when you have good health, you're more likely to achieve at school, and vice versa.
Yeah, I do think these kind of things, it always takes me back to seeing very successful Shore Start organisations
Yeah.
that did, very much did that approach, and unfortunately, wasn't what the government thought was a good idea or worth the money, let's say, at the time, and we lost that.
Absolutely, Stan. And the Child of the North campaign that's been led by the N8 partnership, which is the northern, the 8 strongest northern universities, as well as Anne Longfield Centre for Young Lives. One of the reports that's been published this year is very much on that, around the evidence in terms of the Shore Start centres and this idea of school hubs. So bringing communities closer to schools, joining up some of the provision locally, and really getting an offer right for local pupils, local families, and the wider community. Because as I've just demonstrated, in terms of the priority of different issues, different places need different tailored solutions. So if we can get an offer that better meets those needs, surely that's a win-win as well.
Yeah.
I first came across that idea that somebody centrally thought they knew what was going on in education when I went to a meeting with the senior advisor at the time, who gave us the list of priorities for the county and said these should be on every school's school development plan. And I said, why would I have that on my school development plan?
Yeah.
Well, because it's a county-wide issue, but it's not in my school. It's nothing, this was to do with reading. My school results are superb in reading. We don't need to have that as an area of improvement, but there are other things we need to do that are local, the context of the school, and we need to do that. And he couldn't get his head around the fact that I wasn't prepared to add his issues that were nothing to do with my school onto my school's plan.
Yeah. A broad brush approach doesn't work, does it?
No.
No, I think I don't want to name the trust. There are a few quite large trusts in Bradford, but I was quite heartened by sort of the fact that the work that you have done has enabled some trusts to just sort of think about their place within the place, their role within the place, and it's made them think a little bit more broadly about their purpose and why they exist.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a really powerful bit of development, I think, for one particular trust in Bradford, and actually sort of strengthened their work in Bradford, but also the acceptance of their work in Bradford. If you're reaching out to be a constructive partner with others rather than somebody that thinks they've cracked it and you should all follow my approach, I think that's a much more sort of accepting role for schools who might think, oh well, I'd like to get involved now, whereas the arrogance seems to have gone, and it's more around, well, we're all here, we're all in Bradford, we've all got to make it work, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's probably worth mentioning, Frank, that the Education Alliance for Life Chances was born out of a Department for Education funded programme called the Opportunity Area. And these opportunity areas existed from 2018 to 2022 over that 5-year period in 12 cold spots, cold social mobility spots, they call them, in up and down around England. And Bradford was one of those, and it had significant funding over the 5 years it existed. But because of the pandemic, it was originally a 3-year programme, and then the pandemic hit and they extended it 1 year and then a further year. And I guess we'd have made different investment decisions if we had that 5-year funding at the beginning of the 5 years and we knew it was going to be 5 years. But we did a lot with what we had. From whole school improvement to funding essential life skills support in schools, which it's essential, isn't it? That kind of enrichment side of the school experience. But for us in Bradford, it was the partnership that was key, the strength in the working together and the collaboration and the power of doing that to gain a collective impact was something that led us to the legacy, which is now the Education Alliance for Life Chances. So it's probably worth mentioning to folks, it didn't come from nowhere. It grew out of a public funded programme, but now we're doing our own thing that feels right for Bradford. That we're trying to develop these school health hubs and this act locally approach so that schools can be in charge of kind of data-led or data-driven partnerships for children.
Yeah, the opportunity. I'm grateful for the time you've given me to talk about what's happened in Bradford after the opportunity area. But similarly, I think you've had conversations with other sort of colleagues who are post opportunity area who are developing it. And one of the strong themes that's coming through is the involvement of the business world in taking forward this collaboration. So I think when I look back on the opportunity areas, it was really effective seed money in some cases. Some that is just for there's very little sign of the opportunity area, but where particularly in the north, where there has been an investment, you can feel it. You can still feel it.
Yeah.
You're here today because of that.
Absolutely. And different areas spend their money differently. And that was the beauty of that, of it wasn't a top-down approach. And that's the kind of thing we've been talking about just now. But for Bradford, we put a lot of money in, as did the local authority and other partners, was to build the Centre for Applied Education Research. And that builds on the fantastic work of the Born in Bradford work, the cohort study around, the longitudinal cohort study around health and education and the data insights that's given Bradford. But we helped build this Centre for Applied Education Research, bringing together the best academics and researchers from Leeds, Bradford and York universities and others to develop and work on child health inequalities And we thought in Bradford, well, how can our schools, both primary and secondary and multi-academy trusts, benefit from this wealth of data, evidence and research insights? And that's been the beauty of what we started in the Bradford Opportunity Area and what we're doing now with the Education Alliance is really bringing together that, health, education, academia and research, and data is key as well, making sure we understand and we use our data to better predict issues that might be occurring and also understand the interactions between people and services across the district, because we want to make sure we get prevention and early help right so that it's not troubling people further down the line and been a burden on our services, but how we use data and our intelligence is key.
I really feel, Stan, that more people should know what is going on in some
Yeah.
of these post-opportunity areas, because like I've had some involvement in Blackpool, the business community has really taken hold of that work, and you've taken that and done it in a very different way. There is there's some research that's needed to be done about how this seed funding has actually, where it's landed and been used positively, the long excuse me, the long-term impacts of that, so that we can use targeted funding in the future more successfully.
But this goes back to one of our very first Frankenstein chats with a head teacher talking about cathedral building and saying, it took hundreds of years to build some of the cathedrals so that people who designed them didn't see them finished. And we don't have anything in this country, as far as I'm aware, that's long term above the life of a 5-year government.
Oh, and that's a frustration, Stan, isn't
Yeah.
it? That for us in the Education Alliance for Life Chances, we've said, look, we've got to be brave and bold. We need a 20-year ambition.
Yeah.
It's generational stuff we're talking about. The change and the level of change that we want is a young person's lifetime. And 2 years on a waiting list for a child for a health appointment, it's just not good enough.
Enough, is it?
It's a long time in an adult's life,
Mm.
but you think how quick that goes for a child. We need to do things differently, don't we? And yeah, funding in terms of long term and longevity. We
It's
need to.
about getting, I think, political consensus on things and saying, right, actually, as a parliament, we're going to approve this.
Yeah,
And regardless of which party will be in charge in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, we've now put an agreement that this is what we want to do as a government, and we're going to put money in it for 15 years.
yeah.
But the chances of that happening at the moment when it's so adversarial, I don't know, can't
No,
think of the word.
adversarial.
That's the word.
The landscape's challenging in terms of public sector finances, and that's why in Bradford we've had to look beyond, traditional funding routes, look at philanthropy, look at foundation trusts, look at business and industry, because actually what we're doing in Bradford is innovative. We're trying to test this out. We've got some good things happening, but it's going to take time. And we want investment to be with us on that journey. And like you said, it's not 3 years here, it's not even 5. We're here for the long term. That's what we want, and that's what our partnership's committed to.
I think we're going to have to move on now, but the issue around, because I'm facing this with other work that I'm involved in. If businesses, if philanthropy, whatever, you want to contribute to this sort of work, they too need that 5-year, 7-year commitment. I mean, there's a lot of work goes into. I don't know how much time you spend trying to persuade philanthropists that this is a great project to get involved in. You know, that's probably necessary, but actually, it seems to be happening more and more that you have to. The money is not as forthcoming as certainly I would like it in some of the other work that I'm involved in, and it's just diverting attention away from senior leaders to work just with a begging bowl and making
Yeah.
applications to fit a criteria for funding. and it's simply not long enough. The funding commitment isn't long enough from philanthropists and from businesses.
Yeah,
It's not just government. This is it. It's in all
absolutely. It's
areas.
everybody. Yeah.
Everybody.
But I
Yeah.
mean, like other organisations and partnerships, we have a plan, right? We just don't go for 20 years. We've broken it down into 5-year plans, and we're into the second year now of that 5-year plan in Bradford. But yeah, I mean, yeah, remains a challenge, but we have to be optimistic. We
Yeah.
have to have energy, and we have to go where those willing people are,
Yeah.
Frank.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for that, Catherine. And actually, we've just talked for nearly half an hour on that.
Oh,
I know. Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
Just a quick one. I picked up on Twitter somebody saying that inspectors in their school had criticised them for
Oh,
reception children.
we've lost Catherine.
Oh,
I'm
Oh
here.
no,
I'm
she's back.
sorry. I pressed a button that I didn't know I'd pressed stand back. And I heard that sound. So yeah, you've
Yeah.
that's
Ofsted.
saying that it wasn't right for children in the early years to write things that they hadn't write words that they hadn't been taught, and they should only be encouraged to write things when they could presumably phonetically break them down and understand and read. And one, I couldn't find where this had come from, how inspectors had come to this conclusion, because it certainly didn't fit in with any early years practice that I know about, or your own experience of children wanting to write, even though it's just marks on paper. They'll tell you what it says, etc. And I think I've found the source in the book that Ofsted have just brought out, Strong Foundations in the First Years of School, and I actually think it's a misrepresentation of what's said in there. But looking at that document, I just feel as though it's open to wide into misinterpretation, because it doesn't read like a sensible document, if I can be that cruel, because it gives examples with no context and says we saw this, and as soon as you say we saw this happening in a school, you think I'm not sure you did, or who saw that and when did they see it and what was the context of that. And it just feels like it's been thrown together. There's lots and lots of research articles linked to it, but nothing that actually puts it together in a coherent way. I just think it's a dangerous document the way it's been written, and it's typical of one of those that somebody then misquotes, and schools start doing something that it wasn't intended to in the first place.
Stan has a red buzzer now because I'm talking about Ofsted. Here it is. There it is. The thing is, I've said it so many times, Ofsted is not a research organisation in the way that, say, a university is. The strength of its contribution to the sector is what inspectors see. And these documents that bring academic research into findings that they suggest their inspectors have seen, I think just makes it very uncertain as to why Ofsted's doing this in the first place. They've had their fingers burnt so many times over these. It's just they're not learning from the mistakes that have been made before. So I think it's a mistake.
Yeah,
Just
you
go
could
back.
complain to the author, Stan.
Yes,
Could so
I'll pass that on, Stan.
there is no author
No,
listed, of course,
yeah.
in
What's caught
an
your eye?
Ofsted publication.
What's caught your eye, Catherine?
I was reading a paper from the NHS Confederation. It was a new pathway to prevention. There's a lot in there around social return on investment, really about prevention spending. We've mentioned this already, haven't we,
Mm.
this morning in terms of prevention and early help. But it was a startling statistic I saw in this paper, and it was basically saying approximately 500 premature deaths a day could be prevented if everyone in the UK had the low level of mortality of those with university education. So this again goes back to if you go into tertiary education, you're likely to have better health, basically. And education as a social determinant of health, and how important education through from primary, secondary, FE, is so important, and for health, not just for education outcomes, but for health. And that statistic, well, it really shocked me. But it just goes back to why we're doing what we're doing in Bradford, in terms of really trying to better connect our health and education system.
Definitely.
So I go back to it's finding the right people to turn. I think Woody Allen once said the world is run by people who turn up.
Love it, yeah.
It's about getting the right people to turn up.
Yeah.
I mean, and what's caught my eye this week is the Ofcom is actually going to sort of implement controls over, or it's going to publish proposals for controlling social media companies, and linked to the Online Safety Act that was passed end of last year. And I think this is really necessary. I have to say, there's a lot of sort of stuff around. There's a private members bill going through, isn't there? Proposed to go through about banning children from having mobile phones before a certain age, I think is what they're proposing, not having them in schools. I have to say, I visit a lot of schools. I've only seen one mobile phone being used by a child during my visits in all those times. But, but I think that for me, there is a proposal, some very sensible proposals about social media and children's access to social media, and how they can actually sort of withdraw from particular groups, chat groups, if they want, without sharing it that they have withdrawn. Some of these are very simple and I think quite sensible measures. But just on a personal level, I have no. I'm still on Twitter. I mean, I don't know how long I'm going to carry on doing that, but I still am hoping to, be a voice of reason within a sort of the Wild West, shall we say? But actually, I've only blocked, I think it's one person in my time. But I have complained to Twitter on a number of occasions about tweets that I've read, not about me, but I've felt as though they've gone way over. And it's I've every time I've put a report in, it's come back saying we've reviewed it, but we don't feel that this breaches our code of practice. And I just then think, well, what have you got to do in order to break the code of practice? Some of the stuff I've reported on is so awful, and it's the fact that children also can view that material as well. And the final thing that I've had a big thing about. I noticed that was it in Finland where they actually do teach online safety, as part of their sort of drive to ensure that children understand what misinformation is, that they can see the threads of this. And I just don't feel confident enough that there's enough of this stuff going on in our
No,
schools,
absolutely, Frank.
to enable
Frank, you
young
hit the
people to be
nail on the
ready.
head, because the World Wide Web is the World Wide West. It's just, the Wild West. It's just like, what are our children being exposed to day in, day out? Well, they need some help and regulation, because the getting sucked down black holes of goodness knows what, aren't they? And the exposure. And I just think it worries me about what they're exposed to, what ideologies and ideas they're picking up and getting dragged into. So I think anything that can help in this space, I think, is welcome.
Yeah,
I think we need to look at people with responsibility as well, because there's politicians, there's journalists who regularly put things on that are not true in the truest sense.
Yeah.
They are a distortion of what's happened, and nothing seems to happen. Even when people say no, that isn't true, that was something that happened, blah 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 blah, it's still up there, and there's still people reading the first tweet which says X and Y happened when it didn't. And I think there's got to be some kind, particularly for people with an element of authority, that they should somehow have a sanction against them for publishing things that are not true.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, what would that sanction be, Stan?
for me, um, I, I've only I appeared as an expert witness in the High Court in London for Ofsted. Press the button again in 20. I can actually remember I think it was 2012, 2011, and it was at the same time as the Leveson inquiry was going on. And so I turned up, and a lot of the journalists thought I was a sort of witness for the Leveson inquiry. So they were asking me, who I was and whatever, and I said, no, I'm nothing to do with that. Just a little sort of issue over in another court. But Leveson too is what is needed. You know, there are insufficient controls over over media in general. And actually, we have a government now with a massive majority. If this government can't make Leveson two happen, I still look back in horror at what some of the newspapers did. And
Well, the problem is, Frank, they're still doing it, and
yes, yeah, and
the the government of the day, which whatever colour and flavour, need to keep, in their view, keep the press on side. So the last thing they want to
yeah.
do
But
is,
Leveson two will, it was meant to be, the focus was
yeah.
meant to be on
But
those
you'll
restrictions.
notice it's not mentioned very much.
No, no. But I do feel as though, this idea that social media and newspapers and television, they have a higher bar. It might not be high enough, but they have a higher bar, don't they, than social
Yes.
media companies. Social media companies like X can publish whatever they like and seem immune to any sort of controls over their actions, whereas at least a British, shall we say, a British television station is subject to some sort of control. So it is the Wild West in
It's,
social
it's,
media.
it's the rise of conspiracy theories, and the world is against us, whatever. And I feel now, if people coming up with new ideas, and people are going to be slaughtered on social media on the basis that, I mean, what was it in America recently, that the government are controlling the weather, and they are directing the
Bit of misinformation
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
yeah, but they're directing all these storms to
Yeah.
states that tend to vote Democrat,
yeah.
so they
Yeah.
can control it, and they
But Philip's
Yes.
right then, though, isn't it, Stan? We need to educate our young people so that they
yeah.
know if this does pop up, they know what's likely to be true and what's likely to be
Absolutely. And
untrue.
Frank, creating safe spaces in person to have these conversations,
Yes,
that's really vital, isn't it?
Yeah.
That our young people can get informed, feel as though they have a voice and that they're listened to, and can explore these
yeah.
things.
But it's not a subject. That's the problem.
Yeah,
If
No.
it
it's
was a
not, yeah.
subject,
It,
you'd probably have a chance of getting in on the curriculum, whereas this is sort of not a subject. And there has been areas like this before, excuse me, before, where actually because it hasn't got the support of a subject organisation, a subject group behind it. It I think we underestimate the power of subject associations in England a lot, and these associations have got their tentacles into a lot of politicians. So I think that we do need somebody brave enough to go for Leveson too. We need
Yeah.
somebody brave
Well,
enough to force these social media companies to hold them to account for stuff that they publish.
all you need to look at, Frank, is how seriously media studies is
I know.
taken,
yeah.
because it was absolutely rubbish, wasn't it? To the
Yeah,
point that nobody dare, if they were doing media studies, they certainly didn't tell people, because
yeah,
it was the equivalent of trolling
Yeah.
from the
yeah.
bottom.
Yeah. Well, we haven't solved the world, but we have
No.
identified three issues that probably need tackling. But thank you so much, Catherine, for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Frank and Stan.
And good luck with what you're doing, the amazing work you're doing in Bradford.
Yeah.
And I'll come over next year to see how much progress has been made in Keighley with the
You're always
cleaning work.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And so this recording is going to be posted tomorrow. That's Friday in the usual time. And next week there isn't a Frank and Stan weekly chat, but we're going to have that intergenerational opera piece posted next Friday to fill the gap. So until the half-term holidays are over, thank you everyone, and we'll see you again in a week or two. Take care. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.